Fumiya Tomazaki, who happens to be the best gamer there is in Japan, ranked number 1 in his country no less, poured all his heart and soul to be the best and most skillful there is in Attack Fams, a game that he considers as godly. His counterpart in this match, however, could not be further from who he is as a person. One of the most popular boys at school, Tsuji Nakamura, seemed to have it all. Tsuji is good-looking, has good grades, and to top it all off, he's athletic as well. Because of all these good traits, Tomazaki believed him to be a high-tier character in the game of life. But conversely, Tomazaki also believed himself to be a loser, the exact opposite of who Tsuji is in life. And so, at the very least, he managed to increase his skills so much in a game that he actually cares about. So much so, in fact, that his mind was doing a little bit of soul-searching while playing with Tsuji. And sure enough, Tomazaki made quick work of Tsuji. But rather than admit that he had lost plain and simple, he began ranting on about how either the characters they picked weren't compatible, or how easy it is for Tomazaki playing such a bad game. Rather surprisingly, the thing among what Soji said that hurt Tomazaki the most was his bad-mouthing Attack Fams. He lectures Soji about how blaming the game itself when you are the one who lacked skills and practice in the first place is unbecoming of a good gamer. But seeking a way to settle the argument, Tomazaki offers that they switch characters this time around, so that Soji wouldn't have any other excuses. As one might expect, it didn't take long for Tomazaki to beat Soji again, but their game ended when it was almost sunset, so the two exited the school almost by themselves. On their way out, the two encountered two girls who seemed well acquainted with Soji. They talk about what he was doing with Tomazaki, but eventually they left him alone to walk back home. Moments like this are already the norm for someone like Tomazaki, who perceives the game of life as a rather hopeless one. In fact, he already recognized that he might have already lost at life. Anyway, at home, he's back at it again with the gaming, but unlike all the other times he's played online matches, this one would stick to him. He coincidentally got matched with a player whose username is Noname, and for the first time, Tomazaki admitted that this player is skilled. So skilled, in fact, that he openly declared this player to be a lot more skilled at escaping combos, something he himself is weak at because he never gets caught in them. Anyway, this means that Noname has truly spent a lot of hours practicing, if that's the aspect of the game he's really good at. What's more, he's the second-ranked player in Japan, lower only to Nanashi. That's Tomazaki's username, by the way. Still, the outcome of the match had Tomazaki winning, though he breathed a sigh of relief as he did so. Curiously, Nonami decided to reach out. Seeing as how both are in the Kanto region, the two decided to meet up. Fast forward to their allotted place and time of meeting, and Tomazaki found himself waiting and scanning the crowd for his fellow avid gamer. Only when he read the text that Nonami is wearing a skirt did he realize that Nonami was, in fact, a girl. And it was none other than Aoi Hinami, a girl in the same class as Tomazaki, and who, like Soji, seems to have taken life by the reins in terms of being physically fit, beautiful, and smart. Plus, on top of that, she's also a great gamer. Suffice it to say, the two and their different ideologies in life clash, with Hinami stating that she's disappointed that the gamer she respected turned out to be a loser who gave up on life, and Tomazaki defending himself by saying that her and a lot of other people were lucky to start life already in a higher tier than most of the average people. Seeing as how the poor boy looks so out of himself and trying at life, Hinami decided to invite him to her home. There, after talking a bit more, she devised a plan that will help Tomazaki gain much in life by treating the entire thing as a game. She gave him some tips. Like for now, he has to wear a mask and grin non-stop underneath so that he'll be used to smiling. Another way is that she divided what they wanted to achieve with Tomazaki into goals. The ultimate goal being that he will eventually become a normie. But much to his shock, as the two are now talking over their grand plan in a rather less frequented sewing room, Inami gave him a medium goal of having a girlfriend. So that means he has to talk to at least 3 to 4 girls a day to boost his confidence. Sekimoto High School. He was now tasked by none other than Hinami to talk to at least 3 girls starting now. However, just a little thing about the girls in Sekimoto High School. They're allowed to choose between a bow tie or a necktie. Those wearing a necktie were typically regarded as the elite group, so the status of the girls in the school can be easily identified. Unfortunately for the newbie Tomazaki in terms of talking to girls, Hinami had him assigned to girls wearing neckties. First, he has to talk to Yuzu Izumi, a girl seated right next to him in the homeroom. Next is Minami Nanami, will be his seatmate during home economics classes. Actually, his talk with Yuzu Izumi starts off just as planned. According to Hinami, he had to start the conversation naturally and not too forcefully. So since he's already wearing a mask, he was to pretend that he had a cold. So therefore, he had to ask for a tissue from Yuzo. Unfortunately for him, she didn't have any, which led him to talk to another student, Fuka Kikuchi. This student wore a bow tie instead of a necktie, and she has some tissues. While talking with this unplanned girl, Tomozaki wondered whether or not Fuka counts as being the third girl he had to talk to today. He did sell the hell out of pretending to have colds, though. Moving forward to home economics class, Tomozaki purposefully goes in early in order to save some safety for himself if Minami didn't like him. Again, to his surprise, it was her who started the conversation, as she made a comment about how early he was to class on that particular day. He then mentioned something about how it was surprising that girls today would at least have empathy, which makes Minami laugh so much. Apparently, he sounded like an old man. With that, Hanabi Natsubayashi, or Toma for short, arrived in order to check on Minami. But pretty soon, Suji and his lackeys heard Minami laugh so much that they asked her what was so funny. When she allowed Tomosaki to recount his entire spiel, though, they declared he wasn't even funny. It's just that Minami had no sense of humor. They argue about it, Suji and Minami, and they even put it to a vote. Whoever between the two of them must have been the one with bad humor. Of course, with his friends in tow, Suji quickly gained the upper hand on the whole voting thing, leaving Minami to only vote for herself. That is, until Hinami arrived to turn the tide of the argument. She teased Suji back about him having lost to Tomozaki on attack fams, making the rest gain confidence to vote for Minami's side. With that, Minami allowed Tomozaki to call her Mimimi, a very precious nickname that almost everyone else calls her. Still, this all but confirmed that there's still a little bit of bad blood between Suji and Tomozaki concerning the Attack Fam's match from before, something that Hinami lets him know about in their daily after-school meetings. On a little side note, Hinami finally explained why she had picked up a habit of saying "hexactly." Being the gamer that she is, of course it was because of some kind of a game. And since Tomosaki is the best gamer in Japan, he knows what game Hinami is talking about, and him just praising a game she cherished during her childhood seemed to have brought the two a little closer. Anyhow, with his recent improvements, Tomozaki's instructions have now changed. He's to work on his posture, and now he doesn't have to wear a mask all the time. Hinami also made sure that Tomozaki will be joining whatever friend group she happened to accompany on that particular day. But actually, she planned to have him talk to Minami more after school, as the two coincidentally got off at the same station. Although their conversation started about Mimimi quizzically asking the true nature of Tomozaki's relationship with Hinami, she and the very shy boy actually had a more genuine, normal conversation than they had in school. Hinami was of course more than happy to hear about this, and so during their next meeting, had Tomozaki again undertake a new set of instructions. The boy had now gotten a sense of how each conversation between the friend group starts, and how it lengthens based on their personalities. Mimimi tends to open up new topics, being the people pleaser that she is, and Hinami tends to lengthen in for other people to hear. Nonetheless, Hinami gives Tomozaki a set of flashcards containing some topics to further improve his communication skills. What's more, seeing as how the two had a day off at school the following day, she tasked him with spending the entire day with her. In actuality, Hinami's supposed date with Tomozaki is far from any traditional sense of the word dating. It turns out she only asked him out on that particular day to help him dress up properly. And speaking of appearance, she even commended the supposed bottom-tier Tomozaki because at least he already looks good on that particular day. Still, things can still be more perfect, and so Hinami set about to teach Tomozaki about how to properly choose clothes, which ones to wear, and overall just extremely improve his appearance. Someone's gonna get a positive self-image. But knowing Tomozaki, we should hold off on all conclusions about that. The two then headed for an apparel store to shop for the aforementioned clothes. Unfortunately, it seems that Tomozaki is still pretty much awkward in other social interactions despite his improvements. Funnily enough, when talking to the salesman, he had somehow asked for the mannequin instead of the clothes so he could try them on, all because of his poor communication skills. What were you going to do with that mannequin, Tomozaki? Anyway, their recent debacle, or just Tomozaki's apparently, got put behind them as they headed for a restaurant next for a meal. And it's a good thing too, because while there, they managed to run into Fuka, the girl who was kind enough to give Tomozaki a napkin all those days ago. Turns out, Fuka is a working student, and she's taking a part-time job at the restaurant where Hinami and Tomasaki were, coincidentally, currently eating. The following Monday, when classes resumed, Hinami handed out another set of tasks for the already improving Tomasaki. It seems that she's really pushing him to take that social awkwardness out. With that in mind, Hinami told him to talk to Yuzo Isumi more frequently, at least twice a day for this week. And speaking of making giant leaps, he now had to go on a date with another girl. Seems counterproductive, no? Having him talk and date two different girls? But hey, Hinami's the expert here. And so, all throughout the week, Tomasaki tried his best to fulfill Hinami's tasks. But again, taking that big of a leap seems too much for the usually socially reserved boy. This caused a bunch of not-so-good conversations between him and his seatmate Izumi. Most of the time, they're not even meaningful ones, unlike the first time they talked, but rather just short, brief, and heavily awkward situations. And again, Tomasaki's bad social interaction skills are the one to blame, simply because he had no idea how to start a conversation to begin with, much less hold it down and make it extend and continue. By the end of the week, the poor boy was left to rack his brain because he hadn't even reached the quota of talking to Izumi twice a day for one whole week. And not to mention the dating another girl goal. Anyhow, Tomasaki finds himself in the library where again, he had another chance encounter with Fuka, who had approached him. This time they had more or less a good talk, leading the girl to ask Tomasaki if he would like to read the novel that she was currently writing. There you go, Tomasaki. Seeing the apparent good relationship between her student and Fuka, Hinami made a suggestion that Tomasaki should date her instead, but not wanting to be insincere and think he would be dating her just because he had a goal to overcome social anxiety, the boy rightfully hesitates. Tomasaki is a walking green flag for that. Pretty soon, it was time for dismissal, and every student, including Tomasaki, made their way out of the campus. And on his way there, curiously, he met up with Izumi, who had with her an even stranger request. It seemed like progress for the two, didn't it? Apparently, she would like Tomasaki to teach her how to play the video game Attack Fams. But rather unfortunately, for Tomasaki for the most part actually, she was not doing it out of feeling something for Tomasaki, but because she had a major crush on Suji, the most popular boy in school. At least it could be the start of a good friendship, no? As they were walking home from school, Izumi revealed that usually it was she and Suji who would always accompany each other after school. But lately, even the most popular boy in school seemed to be caught up in playing Attack Fams. Apparently, Suji had been training and practicing non-stop in order to beat Tomasaki in what would be their fate rematch, leaving him with very little time to hang out. What's more, Erika, the leader of Isumi's friend group, had asked Soji out, making what seemed to be a typical perfect high school couple, the popular guy and the popular girl. And one could really guess that Erika isn't the type to be sincere about her feelings, just that it's the popular thing to do. Still, that doesn't mean that Izumi had given up on ways on how to hang out with Suji, so she bought a copy of the Attack Fams game and had been practicing non-stop as well. If you're still curious about the game, just think of it as the same as Smash Brothers. Unfortunately for her, just as Tomasaki anticipated, she isn't getting any good, which is why she had asked for his help. And so, Izumi brings him to her house in order to practice. There, he truly saw the extent of Izumi's skills. The girl had nothing going for her except the use of basic beginner moves. He immediately started analyzing the ways he could teach Izumi to improve and began to ramble off in a high-pitched voice while discussing his plan. First, he planned to have her master some movement combos, particularly jumping and short hopping. In order for her to achieve the timing, he had her practice with the buttons on a stopwatch. She was delighted and thankful for his plan, but he asked why he suddenly got high-pitched talking about the whole thing. And suddenly, Tomasaki realized he had developed the same mannerisms as Hinami was when she was teaching him about life. It's actually kinda cute how he immediately thought of her. Anyway, in order to explain to Izumi some more about the stakes he had put on the game, he revealed that before, he used to think that it was life that sucked, and only when he had met a fellow gamer did his perspective start to change. And so, he assured her that if he truly wanted to change, she could do so. The following day, Tomasaki mentioned all that has happened to Hinami in one of their daily reports. The girl instead asks whether or not he had already asked Fuka out. To encourage him some more, she gave him tickets to a movie as a starting point for what would hopefully be his and Fuka's first date. Anyway, on the following days, Izumi continued to show good progress with her tasks. She was even good enough to pass the stopwatch exercise with ease. However, it seemed Tomozaki had another girl on his mind. Going to the library, he looked for Fuka, who was there reading a book. Confessing that he hadn't really read any books written by her favorite author, he stated that perhaps he wasn't worthy to read her books yet, but still, he'd like to continue hanging out with her in the library, reading books and all of that. Fuka happily accepted his confession and his offer. Tomozaki left to wallow by himself in an empty classroom while looking at the movie tickets in his hands. He thought to himself that it wouldn't be nice or fair to ask Fuka out on a movie date right then and there with emotions running so high. Still, he was going to head home when Tsuji and his friend managed to find him. It seemed that their fated rematch was going to happen sooner rather than later, but this time, they had a rather larger crowd compared to last time. First, Izumi arrived all by herself, and then Erika, along with her lackeys, arrived to observe Tsuji and his rematch with Tomozaki. Rather expectedly, however, Tomozaki won the first match with ease. But not giving up, and this time not making any excuses, Tsuji asks for one more match, and Tomozaki, seeing his rival's determination, could do nothing but accept. Still, he didn't go easy on him, and Tomozaki won countless times again and again. Finally, though, Tsuji manages to sneak in one kill, and thinking that their long string of matches is now over, Tomozaki started to leave, but Tsuji asked him to stay, saying that he was not satisfied with only one kill. That's when Erika started to act very entitled and reprimanded Tsuji that they should go. When Tsuji retorted back, she began attacking him personally, saying that he must have felt confident because she asked him out. But now, seeing as how he was obsessed with a game, she started calling him creepy, repeatedly for that matter, and berated him by mocking all the efforts he had made because he still lost to Tomozaki. Unexpectedly, coming to Tsuji's defense, it was Tomozaki himself who stood up and shouted at the very vain Erika. Though he was mad that she called Attack Fams a bad game, he was even more mad that she had the audacity to mock every effort that Tsuji had made. He even mocked her by saying creepy must be the only words she knew, which admittedly was pretty funny. Anyhow, with his sudden outburst, Erika and her lackeys left, and Tsuji, along with his friends and Izumi, followed soon after. Afterwards, during his report to Hinami, Tomozaki instead asked her out to see a movie, but a new one since the tickets Hinami had gave him presented them with scheduling conflicts. About a week has passed since his match with Tsuji, and things have been looking up for Tomozaki. Granted, while on the weekends most of his classmates, or most normies, normal teenagers in Tomozaki's eyes, are all busy going out, doing karaoke and whatnot, he's still staying home to play Attack Fams. He also recalled going out to the movies with Hinami, which generally ended in her just giving him lessons. Still, now he's not looking too shabby all the time, and he had little trouble talking to girls. While browsing through Hinami's flashcards about possible topics, Tomozaki learned that Tsuji's birthday is fast approaching, about a month from now. Thinking that it would be a good conversation starter with Izumi, he casually mentioned it to her during class. However, the girl's flustered reaction told him otherwise, and he wonders if the comment was a little insensitive to Izumi knowing that she liked Tsuji. Anyway, after classes, Tomozaki got approached by one of Tsuji's friends, Takahiro Mizusawa. It's not to fight or anything, it's just that he witnessed him stand up for Tsuji and he admired him for that. He also mentioned that they should grab a bite for lunch with Hinami whenever they're available, and he could bring a friend too. Looked like Tomozaki managed to make a new acquaintance for himself, and so he reported it to Hinami. She suggested that Tomozaki should invite Izumi. With that, he got the idea that they should allow and accompany Izumi during their get-together to buy a birthday gift for Tsuji, knowing that she would really like to. And so, he took another shot at talking about Tsuji's birthday to Izumi. However, it seemed that the girl was really shy and evasive when talking about it. With little choice left, Tomozaki feigned that he too would like to buy a gift for Tsuji as well, reasoning that he wanted to mend the awkwardness between the two because of their previous encounter, and because regardless, they're fellow gamers. Izumi exploded with delight, simply because the two boys that she had fun being around, she doesn't have any romantic feelings for Tomozaki, mind you, are looking for ways to get along. Perhaps it might be the start of their friendship. A little while later, Miyazawa found Tomozaki alone in the boys' locker, and he revealed that he had heard he invited Izumi to their lunch. He noted that Tomozaki had been properly taking care of himself, though unnoticeable to others, and had a steady relationship with Hinami and Izumi. He doesn't have any ulterior motives though, and just concluded that Tomozaki must have found a de-geeking journal to explain how he's been improving so much. Anyhow, the day of their lunch/shopping get-together finally arrived, and Tomasaki was visibly more nervous than usual. As he and Hinami arrived first, Hinami reminded his unfortunate student that it was his choice to upgrade their lunch to a shopping routine, so he doesn't get to complain. She instead reminds him of his current tasks for the day, which is to confidently suggest 2 things to the group, and they have to be successful too. Soon enough, both Miyazawa and Isumi arrived, and they talked a bit before walking. It seemed like Tomasaki was still struggling with talking even to people he's comfortable with, as he realized he hasn't said a word since they arrived. Anyhow, the group then went about their way shopping, with Izumi asking Tomasaki first if he had any ideas about what kind of gifts to get Tsuji. But actually, Tomasaki didn't lose out in terms of talking, as Izumi herself shared that apparently there's a rumor going on that Hinami and Miyazawa are dating. What a curveball! Regardless, it took them a long time to actually get a good enough idea though. Only when they took a break from shopping did they figure out that their hair products are a great idea for a gift for Soji. When they made their idea known to Miyazawa, he suggested that they go to a really nice hair product store where they could buy what they wanted. Little did he know that Tomasaki was getting ready to suggest something as per his daily task, but instead pulled his suggestion when Miyazawa had spoken more clearly. But Miyazawa isn't that much of a bad guy, it's just that he didn't know. Besides, while still there, he helped style and suggest a wax for Tomasaki's hair, which led to his realization that he may have been selling himself short when he saw his reflection. Gaining enough confidence, he brought the group to an electronics store, and there he bought his gift for Soji. Afterwards, after eating yet again in a place from Miyazawa's suggestions, the group went home. These were the topics that went up in Tomasaki and Hinami's daily reports, about making suggestions and being somewhat of a leader for the group, but at least they were happy of Tomasaki's realization that he isn't at all that hopeless. And that's all thanks to Miyazawa. Anyway, the start of the elections for the student council was announced during their homeroom class, and the 2 frontrunners for it were Hinami, which everyone expected, and Minami, who with a smile and an air of competitiveness declared she wouldn't lose. With the upcoming student president elections that will pit Hinami against Minami, unfortunately, Hinami cannot keep doing the daily reports she had with Tomasaki. She's going to be pretty occupied, and she can't keep him on her schedule. However, as an alternative, she instead asked him to participate in Minami's campaign as her primary supporter. Hinami stated that it is going to be a good experience for Tomasaki, but if Minami will reject him, then he has to practice all by himself until Hinami's campaign is done. Naturally, Tomasaki expressed his concern that he might not be qualified to become a primary supporter, but Hinami, without a shred of arrogance, told him that supporters wouldn't matter because she knows Minami would never beat her. So competitiveness goes for both of these girls apparently. This left Tomasaki racking his brain on how to properly suggest himself to Minami as her primary supporter. But when a chance encounter that put Minami right into a conversation with him, he immediately sprung at the opportunity and offered to become her supporter, stating his interest in the election as his reason. However, it seemed that Minami didn't think he was up to the task, and so had rejected his offer nicely. That doesn't mean that he had given up the thought about the whole thing though, only he had no idea left on how to pursue becoming her primary supporter. It bothered him so much that while at the library with Fuka, she noticed that he seemed a bit preoccupied, stating what he's been going through with the whole wanting to help with Minami's election campaign but he doesn't know how situation. Fuka offered him a fresh perspective on the entire thing. She questioned whether or not Tomasaki knew what reasons Minami had for running in the first place. These thoughts seemed to provoke Tomasaki heavily, but not before he openly and unintentionally called Fuka cute because of the way she acted. But before the random weeb degeneracy, let's dive into, well, more of the weeb degeneracy. Except with guns. And no, I don't mean the ones that shoot organic matter. The ones in your hand where you keep shooting robots and mechs until they're absolute blisters. Starlusts is an adult interstellar sci-fi shooter listed by the ever-so-cultured Eero Labs, who've consistently proved why they are the staple of the phrase 18+. And they've listed many impressive games. You assume the role of a commander guiding a spaceship full of cadets on a mission against alien forces threatening the human race. You have full control to be the leader of a squad full of cadets, a group of strong, charming, and gifted girls, ready to take on your orders, and much more. You also have a highly customizable R&D menu where you build your own weapons, equipment, armor, chips, and drones. Basically, you're in command of how to take advantage of Starlust's awesome gameplay mechanics. They also have the breakthrough system that allows you to craft legendary UR equipment almost as explosive as the cadets themselves. You, the commander, will also be able to form intimate relationships with the cadets that stand out the most and unlock more bedroom scenes. Yes, guns blazing and waifu glazing. Your hands will be full, literally. Combine that with some really intricate scenes and your sense of achievement will be boundless. Red alert, Commander! You can't enter yet because you are not 18. That's right. Starlust features explicit adult content which is only meant for adults. If the commander passes the threshold, you can find Starlusts at the official Eero Labs website, link in the description. Download Starlusts now and use code 2023 SSRank for some exclusive rewards, and if you're a sucker for art like myself, Starlusts will feature a special Christmas event from December 25th to January 22nd. So don't keep the cadets waiting. Download and play Starlusts! Anyhow, the following morning it seemed Minami was well on her way to start the campaign, along with her new primary supporter, a friend from the track and field team. She started by standing at the school's gate and greeting each and every single student. But despite all that effort, even Tomasaki realized that she's truly no match for Hinami's campaign. She even had Miyazawa as her primary supporter, who demonstrated his skill at gathering the people's attention to him. Still, it seemed that Tomasaki had not given up on trying to help Minami, and as if fate had a thing or two to say about it, he encountered Minami by chance along the school's hallway again. The latter seemed to be in a rush, but happily nonetheless, and she gave the boy her first drafts of her election flyers. Noticing that there were many mistakes, Tomasaki saw another chance to help, and this time, he made sure to really show how useful he can be. Fixing a lot of mistakes on Minami's election flyers, Minami finally accepted his offer to be a primary supporter, mainly because of his huge help, and also partly because her old one had after-school activities. Still, before she accepted him though, she asked him why he was so set on helping her on this campaign. Thinking long and hard, Tomasaki admitted that he wanted to go up against Hinami, the girl he thought was a high-tier character in the game of life. He thought that it would be fun to go up against a real-life boss and see how his skills fare outside the world of video games. Something seemed to click in Minami's eyes, but otherwise, she half-jokingly acknowledged Tomasaki's resolve. Anyhow, it wasn't just her flyers that Tomasaki managed to fix, but even her entire campaign program and the promises she brought to the student body if she manages to win. Focusing on a specific demographic among the student population, they target the sports students, particularly the volleyball club, first by suggesting an electronic ball pump for every sport-related club. Minami also got to play and tease Tama, who is part of the volleyball team. By the time the classes ended, Minami and Tomasaki find themselves alone in a playground while the sun sets. They again got into the topic of why Tomasaki was so diligent and willing to help, but he flipped the question onto Minami, and then she revealed that she had a strong desire to beat Hinami just this one time, as apparently she was second to her in almost anything, be it sports, exam scores, and anything and everything in between. Oh, you poor sweet girl. Afterwards, Tomasaki had her go and focus her campaign towards the first years, promising air conditioning for every classroom if she won the elections. They seem to have finally got a foothold in the fight against Hinami, and the two share a very crisp high five. All the while, Hinami smiled as she managed to see her friends having fun. On this very rare occasion, now that the two don't get to spend much time together, Tomasaki accompanied Hinami during one of their walks along the school's hallway. They talk a little bit about how much improved Minami's campaign is, but really, Hinami was there to playfully express how sad playing Attack Fams was because Nanashi, which is Tomasaki's in-game username, has been absent for a while now. However, Tomasaki stated that he was playing, and right now, he's been playing with Nonami, or Hinami, all along. It's just that their battle now has taken place in the real-world setting. With that, Hinami hoped that their fight for the student president position would be just as exciting as their online games. And so, the speech for the candidates for the student president have begun. First off, Hinami's campaign gets to hold the microphone first, and Miyazawa actually did a pretty good job of rallying the crowd with his charm and ability to sway the mood of a large group of people. This all worked to Hinami's advantage, as after her primary supporter's speech, it was now her turn. And suffice it to say, she really did kill it out there, starting off with a little bit of humor and then pushing towards her more serious agenda. But her secret weapon, it turned out, was the fact that she had managed to incorporate every campaign promise that the Minami party had and improved upon it onto her own. This was a huge blow to Tomasaki and Minami, as for example, they had only promised the school's first years for the air-conditioned rooms, but Hinami promised it for everyone. And even while getting the teacher's angry looks, Hinami persevered on. Now that is some courage. Anyhow, despite taking a huge hit, Minami and her team were undeterred. Still, Tomozaki thought it best to help add a little bit of something to make Minami gain an advantage over the opposition by her speech. While she was on stage reciting her memorized speech, Tomozaki had gone up the second floor to play a Navi assistant tune, which is kind of like Suri, a virtual assistant. The resulting comedic ad-lib between the virtual assistant and Minami made for quite a few laughs and energized the crowd, making both Tomozaki and Minami proud of both of their efforts. And now, during the day of voting and counting, all that's left is to wait for the results. But rather unfortunately, it seemed like they did not have it in their cards to win, as Hinami ended up winning in a landslide victory. It did nothing to dampen the happiness that Minami showed Tomozaki as she thanked him while they hung out after school. She truly expressed how it must have been nice to win, and Tomozaki could do nothing but try to cheer her up, saying that there's always going to be a lot more competition between her and Hinami. Despite her smile though, Tomozaki wondered how much hurt Minami must have felt deep inside. Traces of sadness could be seen from her eyes. The next day, however, things went back to more or less the same, as it started off with Tomozaki and Hinami's usual before classes meeting. She commended their efforts during the campaign, particularly Tomozaki's plan about using a virtual assistant to have Minami ad-lib some parts of her speech. Still, back to business, Hinami now has him tasked with asking Fuka out to a movie date about one of her favorite author's works being adapted. Though he was a little bit nervous and awkward about it at first, he did successfully ask Fuka out while they were in the library. Look at Tomozaki, finally making major steps forward. Still, it seemed that not everyone was back to normal after the elections. Minami had been trying to compete and work extra hard at all things against Hinami, even track racing practices. This went on for quite some time, and Tomozaki would even see Tama looking at her friends. Hinami and Minami staying after practice had ended to compete with each other. It seemed that according to Tama, Hinami was the reason they were all friends, as she pushed her to accept Minami's rather annoying and weird attempts at friendship. Though apparently, she only did so because she doesn't want Tama to be lonely, and after school, even after their fierce competition, it truly seemed that Tama was right about all three of them being close friends. But however, by Tomozaki's account, he noticed a slight change in Minami after that. In this episode, Minami's perspective is highlighted more than anyone else. It starts with her recounting her middle school days and her time as part of her school's basketball team competing in the Saitama Prefectural Tournament. However, it seemed that was the start of her always becoming second place in life behind Hinami, as the latter's team had beaten hers during the second round of the said tournament. She apparently dreamed this memory as she fell asleep from too much studying, and so she frantically ran out of her house as she was about to miss her routine nightly exercise run. Anyway, back in the present, there had been a growing concern among everyone, and not just her group of friends, that Minami had been overworking herself and pushing herself to the brink a little too much ever since the elections had ended. Besides, in her own words during a previous episode, she had to do extra hard on trying to make up for her recent loss to Hinami. Even Fuka managed to pick this sense of urgency from Minami. As she and Tomozaki were talking in the school library, she figured that Minami had been trying non-stop to compete with Hinami after her loss in the elections. Tomozaki was amazed she knew, despite no one telling her about it. Fuka said that sometimes she thinks about why people do the things they do, and in Minami's case, it was like she somehow can't see the goal anymore. And in turn, he expressed his concerns for her when they managed to hang out after school again. But rather than listen to reason and realize that she had been pushing herself too much, she instead tried to appeal to Tomozaki's nature as a gamer. Of course, with Tomozaki previously declaring that no one wants to end in a loss, and wanting to respect Minami's resolve as a fellow gamer, at least in life that is, he didn't reprimand her anymore, and instead bade her to hang in there. And that's something that Minami was surely glad to hear. Still, the matter of Minami essentially self-destructing was a cause of concern for everyone else, particularly Hinami, the person she's competing with. And so, this came up in Hinami and Tomozaki's daily reports. But when the topic of conversation reverts to the reason as to why Minami feels so strongly about competing with Hinami, the latter avoids answering the question, even though she already knew the answer. In her defense, she rightly says that it's not her place to talk about such things. This only meant that Tomozaki had to get the information from someone else. And soon enough, he managed to eventually learn the true reason as to why Minami has an almost obsessive impulse to win against Hinami. starting from that basketball game. The next few days saw heavy rain come upon the school, as Tomozaki and Tama observed the track and field. For one crazy moment, they had thought that Minami was going to practice running under the heavy rain, but to their surprise, it was only Hinami out on the field. It seemed like Minami had skipped practice, and later on, during class, they learned that she eventually had quit the track team. She also started to avoid going home with friends, but fortunately, Tomozaki managed to catch her while near the train station. Talking about her recent troubles with competing with Hinami, Minami revealed that it was not at all because of the loss. Rather, it was because when Hinami and her team won second place during that tournament, she wasn't smiling or wasn't being happy, but she cried when another team was announced as the winner. Minami had strived to become just like her ever since, but it seemed like she reached her limit. She excused herself from Tomozaki, saying that she left something at school, and promptly left. The next day, after classes, Minami tried to leave with a few new friends again. However, Tomozaki managed to convince her to allow him and Tama to accompany her home. Agreeing to do so, Minami was finally able to let out all her pent-up feelings to Tama, particularly the envy she felt towards Hinami and how she always manages to come out on top. But through Tama's inspiring and caring words, saying that Minami was her hero on top of a lot of things, Minami finally was able to let go of her harbored negative emotions. And now, with Tama's help, she was back to her old energetic self, and was even back on the track team. But Tomozaki seemed to have been faced with a new challenge. It seemed that Suji's birthday was near, and so he had to give him his present and talk with him for at least 3 minutes. He succeeded in the first one, but failed miserably at the second one, suddenly asking some rather gossiping topic if Miyazawa and Hinami were really dating. Still, now that Minami is back to her usual self, she formally apologized to her friends, and even to Hinami, and gave all of them identical cat keychains as well. Summertime has finally arrived. But that doesn't mean that the lessons for Tomozaki from Hinami about how to level up on the game of life stops. They agreed to meet at Omiya Station, with Hinami arriving first. When she saw how plain-looking Tomozaki was, she couldn't help but bury her head in her hands in disappointment. To be fair, he did admit that he had no summer clothes to put on. Nonetheless, this all meant that Hinami would have to add one more thing to the agenda. First, they discussed their lessons over a meal. It seemed apparent that throughout the summer, Tomozaki would still receive assignments or goals from Hinami, and the first and foremost important of them being that he will have to date Fuka this summer. Isn't that too much of a leap, Hinami? But still, even with Tomozaki expressing his doubts about the whole thing with Fuka, Hinami began to point out the many similarities between the two. They already liked the same things, and Fuka really seemed to like Tomozaki. And besides, they're already going to see a movie, so there's no harm in asking. Well, you are the expert, Hinami. Here's to hoping that at the very least, it doesn't end up a disaster. And to alleviate all his doubts about the whole thing, Hinami said that he and she will go on a practice date so that by the time Tomozaki and Fuka will have their real date, he'll be confident enough. And as it turned out, she had already prepared all the dating sites for their practice date, and had even given the locations to Tomozaki. Now, they're gonna pretend that it was he who came up with the idea in the first place. Now, that's truly the mind of a mastermind. Anyhow, the two first hit a clothing store where it was Tomozaki who was helped by Hinami in terms of shopping for some good pairs of t-shirts that match his pants. Also, during their entire date, she helped him communicate more naturally, though sometimes he still finds it hard to pick up on humor. Hinami also noticed that Tomozaki does not have a proper backpack, so she essentially gave him one, and being the kind person that he was, he doesn't readily accept, no matter how much she tried to downplay giving such a nice backpack away. At first, she tried to say that it was scratched, though only by a little. But then she asked Tomozaki to buy her a summer-themed badge to even out her giving him something. Although he doesn't say it, Tomozaki actually appreciated how Hinami made him buy her something, so that he wouldn't feel the guilt of actually receiving something nice for free. Anyway, aside from clothes, Hinami also helped him buy a lot of products that could boost his appearance. Meanwhile, it seems that Tomozaki has a lot more on his schedule than just preparing for a date with Fuka. Apparently, he and his friends are planning on going on a trip, and the next day after their shopping, Hinami, Minami, and Miyazawa all come to visit Tomozaki at his house to prepare for the said trip. And again, Miyazawa comes in clutch to teach Tomozaki about the proper way to use the hair products that he had bought the day before. Man, bro is truly sharing words of wisdom around here. Anyhow, Time passed, and soon enough, the allotted day for Tomazaki and Fuka's date had arrived. As for someone without any prior legitimate experience about the whole thing, surprisingly, Tomazaki managed to bring the whole date to the finish line without so much as a hitch. Seeing as how the date went relatively smoothly, and how he actually enjoyed spending time with Fuka, Tomazaki realized that he wanted to take her out on a date again, and taking Hinami's advice for another time and day for a proper date, Tomazaki asked Fuka for the upcoming fireworks show, which she also happily accepted. But until then, it seemed that Tomazaki's attention was focused on the trip he and his friends had planned, and so he packed his bags diligently. It's finally time for Tomazaki and his friends' planned summer vacation trip. And would you have it? Tomazaki's the first one waiting at the station. Someone's a little excited. Anyhow, most of his friend group arrived immediately afterwards, first of which is Minami, partly because they got on the same train station. Still, she commended him being the early bird, and thanked him for saving her the day before. Though quite amazed by her gratitude, Tomazaki didn't know how to properly react since he never had someone else thank him right in his face before. The train ride to where their friends are waiting for them is over in an instant, and so it officially begins. But actually, they've got one more unplanned companion, Takai, who is Suji's friend. He even enthusiastically took the group's photo. Where did he come from? On the train ride to the bus station, the group took their time to talk about mundane things. Izumi brought some candies to enjoy throughout the trip and offered it to Suji, but instead he playfully called him a child. Meanwhile, Monami and Miyazawa seemed especially excited at firing up the grill when they got there. Tomazaki and Hinami, however, are busy plotting away, which also, coincidentally, meant that they had to exclude Takai since he wasn't part of the planning progress. And besides, the two of them have something else to talk about, which was Tomazaki's daily task. For today, aside from trying to mingle with Suji a total of 3 times throughout the trip, he also had to befriend Miyazawa. Hinami stated that out of all the boys, he's the one closest to becoming Tomazaki's friend, and that he was the one to give him the most benefit when they grow up into their adult lives. Regardless, Hinami assured Tomazaki that he could use today's experience to build himself up some more. Anyway, the train eventually arrived at the bus station, where the group took a bus to reach Keko's family village, a vacation destination that seemed to be a resort camp. And as one could imagine, being young teenagers, the group managed to have fun and make the most out of their trip, creating a bonding experience for the whole lot of them. And actually, Tomazaki makes very great progress with his daily tasks as well. Being separated from the girls as the rooms were assigned by gender, finally managed to start hanging out with the guys in order to make leeway for his daily goals. Afterwards, the group then headed to the girls' room in order to join the female group in a card game, that being Tycoon. And with that, Tomazaki finally managed to complete his second assigned task for the day, that being to officially befriend Miyazawa. And what's more, Tomazaki's role doesn't even stop there. He's on a friendship streak. Later, when the guys had decided to spend time together at the hot springs, he managed to also complete his first task, which was to mingle with Suji extensively and without awkwardness. As stated before, guys only need a few times of goofing around before eventually becoming friends. Though admittedly, Suji and Tomazaki aren't yet friends, but it's a start. And besides, the friend group wasn't done having fun for the day. Later that evening, they decided to split up into 2 teams in order to play a game that tests their courage. However, this means that the really awkward Tomazaki got constantly teased by none other than his mentor, Hinami, when they were alone. The only reason being was because Tomazaki constantly gets flustered throughout the entire game. However, when he tried to dish back the teasing, it created an entire awkward moment between the two. Looks like Hinami could only dish it out and not take it back. Despite being in the middle of a summer vacation, Tomazaki's lessons and goals on trying to beat or at least improve on the game of life still don't stop. And with that spirit, Hinami had asked him to meet in the middle of the night in order to check up on his efforts concerning his daily goals. And little does she know, our boy has done them all. Tomazaki started by reporting that he successfully achieved the first goal assigned to him, which was to talk and communicate with Suji at least 3 times that day. However, before he could even continue their conversation, the two got interrupted by someone out of the blue. From out of nowhere, Miyazawa came out of nowhere, and it seemed like he was looking for Hinami. More than that, it seemed that he was wanting to say something to her as well. Unfortunately, this also meant that Tomazaki had to hide as Miyazawa approached, as in the first place, his and Hinami's meeting was secret. Anyway, back to Miyazawa. As confident as he always was, he began to confess his love to Hinami directly. This also meant that the rumors of them dating before were false. But what's true is that at least one of them truly had feelings for the other. Meanwhile, caught in a rather awkward and unfortunate position, Tomozaki, understandably so, expectedly had an unexpected reaction, seeing as how he was never even supposed to hear what Miyazawa had to say in the first place. Still, it was quite a shock for anyone if they had heard it, not just in Tomozaki's situation. Anyhow, the group's vacation trip came to an end the following day, and they had to leave behind the good times as each of the friends headed home by themselves. However, it seemed that even quite the eventful day wouldn't prevent Hinami from handing out a task for Tomozaki. With the day of his date with Fuka fast approaching, she had him tasked with confessing his love to her. Much like how Miyazawa confessed, she meant. Anyhow, Tomozaki's planned date with Fuka finally happened, and it was also the first day of the summer festival, hence why they planned the date around watching the fireworks show. To his credit, the date was just as successful as one could have, and the two genuinely had fun for themselves. Unfortunately, when the time came to do so, Tomozaki could not bring himself to confess. Despite the romantic and perfect setting the evening of the summer festival had provided for them, Tomozaki could just not make himself confess his love towards Fuka, although it had nothing to do with her. Afterwards, Tomozaki and Hinami decided to meet at the station in order to have their daily progress report, while also in order to talk about Tomozaki's recent date. There, the boy poured his heart out, saying that he did not feel comfortable even a little bit when confessing his supposed love to Fuka, and the simple reason behind it was he was just not sure that it was what he wanted in the first place. Tomozaki's dilemma was that even though he was awkward to talk to without his flashcards giving him topics to talk about, Fuka seemed so happy and okay talking with him without it. He started thinking that talking using his newfound skills seemed like talking while being in a personality not totally himself, and so he wondered should he pursue conversations as himself or with the skills he's managed to acquire. The task assigned to him seems kind of rushed anyway. Surprisingly, Hinami's reaction to Tomozaki failing a task was harsher than usual. In fact, it was way too much just because he failed to confess. And what about all his positive progress? Were those all of a sudden now not relevant and not counted? Regardless, Hinami seemed to fixate too much on Tomozaki's statement about not knowing exactly what he wanted as of the moment. But like they weren't friends, she began to berate him for it. Not only did she do this, she also openly mocked and criticized what seems to her was Tomozaki's lack of commitment and resolve, and worse, his fear in trying to find it for himself. What's worse than that is she immediately labeled and left him to be defined as a loser, something that Tomozaki has been truly trying to escape from by following the set of rules and guidelines that the person berating him now had given him herself. Now that's truly not a nice thing to do. Don't beat up your friends with the knowledge of how low you know they've been feeling at life. Come on. Unfortunately, the harsh and sharp words of his supposed mentor and friend had already gotten to Tomozaki, destroying him from the inside. After the recent events, Tomozaki truly was left dejected, and so he began to increasingly regress back to when he was a loner, to when the only thing that mattered to him was attack fams. Even his new friends, who not long ago he shared laughs with, were now being shut off from his life by his own doing. Fortunately, his sister, who had seen how much he had truly escaped his old, confined life, and fearing his very sudden dark turn, managed to convince him to at least see and reply to all the text messages his friends had been sending him, all out of genuine concern and longing for his companionship. That's a boss move from your sister, Tomozaki. She's a real G. To his surprise, it seemed that one of those text messages he'd been putting off had been from Fuka herself. It seemed that out of the blue, she herself had sent him a request for a date, this one being all the more special because she isn't forced to do so, nor is she asking for a date for the sake of a goal, just as Tomozaki had done before. Finding newfound hope, he agrees to Fuka's request for a date. Fuka coming in clutch, man. And their date was so similar to the previous one they had recently had, where they enjoyed each other's company, had fun, but there was no pressure to confess any feelings. Still, what made this all the more different and special was because finally, Tomozaki told someone, that someone being Fuka, which is a sweet thought in itself, about how he's currently taking lessons on how to improve his life by treating it as a game. And to do so, he had to achieve a couple of small and medium goals on his way to his ultimate one, that being him finally becoming one of the supposed normies. He also admitted that he was never sure of conversations, and he relied way too much on flashcards given by Hinami for topics to talk about. so he became unsure whether or not he's actually talking as himself or a different persona. So much so when Fuka herself had told her that he was great to talk with. And Fuka, quite frankly showing why she's the best girl in the series, showed her approval of Tamazaki's way of trying to build his life up for the better. At first, she relayed that upon their initial meeting, she thought that he saw the world the same as she did, as black and white. Later on, when they've continuously been talking throughout their times together, she began to view him as a world getting more colorful. Those times that she perceived him as black and white, as she assumed must have been when he was trying to stick to the topics from the flashcards. And what's more, her approval meant the world because it finally cheered him up. Take that, Hinami! And speaking of Hinami, sometime later, Tomazaki asked his former close confidant and master, Hinami, to come meet him on the very first place they met all those days ago. There, Tomazaki finally shows all the resolve and strength he had gathered from trying to get good at living life. First, although he told her that he agreed with everything she had ever said about judging a game without ever trying it, pertaining to his old views about seeing life as the worst game there is, he defends his previous assertions as well. He ranted that he liked games because they were able to make him create a character the way he wanted to, unlike in life. But recently, through the help of his friends and even Hinami herself, he's been able to gradually add color to it, little by little. And so, he offered to Hinami to continue their lessons and to continue being master and pupil, saying that it's something he really wants to do, and that there's still something he really wanted to prove to Hinami. How about that resolve, huh, Hinami? Still, Hinami was adamant that all this was a mistake, until Tomazaki, finding a new stroke of confidence, remarked that Hinami may be the one who was playing the game of life better than the two of them, but it was him who was truly better by a mile when it comes to enjoying playing it. Starting right now, he declared that he was going to show her how to truly appreciate and enjoy living life, and urged her to learn from him as well. And that's coming a lot from a person who truly felt that he was the worst, low-tier person there is. Though admittedly, he's not that good at explaining the rules, so he assumed it might take him a while. Still, he managed to pique Hinami's interest, and so she agreed to his offer. And to get back on track, she tasked him with getting a part-time job. And what better job could there be than working as a waiter at a karaoke parlor with Miyazawa as his coworker? And that's the end of this anime recap, guys. Hope you liked the video, and if you did, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next one.